it takes a process for us to solicit grants, to make sure that the money can go to the areas that are needy, to go to the organizations that can actually touch the real workers. So some of those grants have not been able to make it out yet, simply because you can't do this in 2 seconds. We want to do it in an accountable way. We want to do it in a way that's responsible. We do not want to waste the American taxpayer dollar, and these are crucial dollars in order to stimulate the economy. So when you hear people say that the stimulus monies will flow later this year and then into early next year, part of it was by design, and part of it is just simply from the way that the government works and the fact that we want to, as a carpenter would say, measure twice, cut once. So, those grants are approved and are on their way out of the door within the next couple of months. Hopefully, the announcements will be prominent in your papers, and all of these are being made with an eye to making sure that, as my boss, Secretary Solis, says, we're going to create good jobs for everyone. And I can assure you that Secretary Solis means for everyone. So the Department of Labor has been active in making sure that wages are protected as we get the dollars out of the door. Some of these dollars are in new areas. Weatherization projects, for instance, have required us to do the work to set in place the proper wage levels so that we can create good jobs, not simply manufacture low-wage jobs. And again, that process takes time. It's not something that we can do a wage survey and give for each region of the country the proper wage level in order to ensure that our projects are not going to lower the wages of American workers. So, it's very hard to say in the midst of a storm of this nature, clearly the worst labor market you have experienced. And when you look at the extreme from the low unemployment rate we had going into this recession and where we are today, having reached the double-digit level most recently, this is a more rapid fall for the labor market than even we experienced in the 1980s. So this is clearly the worst labor market we have had since the Great Depression. And as rapidly as we went into it, unfortunately, we're not going to climb out at that same speed. That just is not going to be possible. We have, through the ARA, the Recovery Act, also been able to change trade adjustment assistance. Many of you may be living in communities where plants are shutting down. We are able to respond to those in a much quicker way. We have accelerated at the Department of Labor our assessment of trade adjustment assistance that has to take place. The ARA included additional training money. That training money has made its way out into the states. Some of that has been around targeted areas where we've seen massive plant closures. There are huge efforts underway in Michigan and the auto communities to make sure that we are trying to figure out comprehensive answers in the auto-affected community. So all of this, again, is not something we can do on a dime, but all of those things are underway. So I encourage you to watch, to look at the grantees, because a diverse set of folks will be seeing these grants. We had Native American leaders to the Department of Labor just last week during the visit that took place with President Obama. All of them had a chance to talk with the Secretary about their concerns, about the way that job training money flows into Indian country, and how it flows in states like Alaska, where because of Alaskan law, there is no Indian country to speak of. So we are trying to make sure that we are reaching every community. We have tried to make sure and design the grant process so that all communities would have access to the job training dollars, and in particular, as the money gets rolled out on both the green jobs jobs and the healthcare training that is coming down the pike.
Thank you so much. Questions?
Yeah, since as you know, the unemployment rates on reservations are quadruple, triple more what the unemployment rate is overall. So, and then there was the nation's conference, tribal nations conference last week. When you had the meeting with tribal leaders, what did you tell them to make them think things will be different, especially on the jobs front? Because when, in talking to a number of tribal members, when they heard jobs, they heard stimulus, they heard jobs, the thought was, how much employment can we really get? And what would change in order for us to get that type of labor into the reservations and urban areas?
Well, it was a listening session, and many of the tribal leaders were telling us how they were getting more effective at actually using the stimulus money. A lot of road projects, for instance, in Indian country had been done through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and many of them had found that it was easier to use the ARA money and go through the Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration, and many of them were sharing among themselves information on how to access the funds in a more efficient way, dealing with the bureaucracy that was more efficient than their experience had been with BIA. They shared with us issues of concerns with making sure that the Indian country was able to access revenues from some of the projects that took place, because some of the projects aren't on Indian land, some are close, and the issue of getting an agreement to make sure that some of the dollars would flow directly. This gets the contracting as well, making sure that there would be access to contracting. So many of them actually shared with us success stories that they were having and were sharing among each other. Again, because some nations are very small and others are bigger, and some were more sophisticated than others at how to access all of this. So it was both a listening session for us at the department to understand any other red tape that stood in the way, but also for them to share with each other some of their success stories. So I thought that the meeting went well and was meant to be sort of the first step in continuing to learn how these things intersect. The REA funds that come out of the department come with this specific section when it comes to Native Americans, and the issue of that formula isn't something that we directly control. And so there was talk about the formula assessment for how those monies are distributed.
Will any of the upcoming grants or initiatives address African American young male unemployment? The numbers are extremely high, as you know. The second part of it is my question: will non-union based industries see the same type of attention to job growth? But
Well,
first,
in answer to the first question, there are included large amounts of money for summer youth employment. Unfortunately, in some communities, mayors and state governors were very slow to set up the process to receive the funds. But that was a key component of the ARA, was a huge increase in summer youth employment, which had been decimated over the last 8 years. A large chunk of ARA money went to Youth Build, and which is a program designed mostly for minority youth. And we increased that funding, and we've also increased funding for Job Corps. So a lot of the funding that went out through the ARA was very much designed in that way. I would point out that one should not celebrate a 15% unemployment rate in the African American community, but the reality is the last time the unemployment rate was 10%, like it was in the 1980s, the African American unemployment rate was its traditional 2-to-1 unemployment rate. So while 15% isn't anything to be proud of, and I'm not saying I'm proud of that, but by historical standards, the African American unemployment rate right now, given that the white unemployment rate is 9.4, would be something like 18.8. And this is the